Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the Voice of Reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. So today, before we start, I wanted to reach out to all our supporters of the channel. We are trying to obtain a copy of the 2023 edition of the Military Balance. So anyone who desires to assist us in that endeavor, please reach out, do what you can, and hopefully we will have that item very, very soon. It is a very unique book, the only book that exists in the world today that can give you the kind of information that this channel relies upon. So again, thank you again in advance for any assistance. So as we continue our coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine, we're going to have a look at areas where it is possible the Ukrainian military is looking to launch this reported counter-offensive. Now, there's been lots of speculation where this is going to occur, how this is going to occur, and more importantly, is the weather going to be conducive to large-scale military operations? And we believe right now the weather is starting to warm itself, and we are seeing firsthand reports, video reports coming out of the region that shows some of these trenches drying out, and it is starting to dry up somewhat. Is it completely ideal as of yet? No, it's not. But again, the possibility exists that the Ukrainians are looking, possibly in terms of what the Ukrainians are talking about, launching an offensive sooner rather than later. And we keep hearing this sometime in May operation by the Ukrainian army. So where are the Ukrainians going to launch this offensive? Is it going to be a broad front offensive running from Luhansk, Donetsk, all the way down to Zaporizhia? Is it going to be a D-Day-like amphibious operation in which large numbers of Ukrainian forces cross the Dnieper River? Is it going to be a focal point on Luhansk Oblast? Is it going to be a operation, a gut shot through the Donetsk Oblast? Difficult to say, but we'll kind of look at all these areas and possibly where the Ukrainians are looking to attack. So we're going to start in the north, and obviously the Luhansk area is a mixed bag. That was an area, or northwest of Luhansk, east of Kharkov, is where the last large Ukrainian offensive operation took place. And the possibility that the Ukrainians will expand upon that offensive operation and look to drive an attack in northern Luhansk in an attempt to envelop the Russian forces that are building up in central Luhansk in this area, I would say at this point is unlikely. The Russians are fairly strong in this area. There are large numbers of Russian forces building up in the Luhansk Oblast for their own possible future-facing offensive operations against Ukrainian forces. Now, what would the main goal of a Ukrainian offensive in Luhansk be? Well, we think that they would look to drive north of these large Russian units that are kind of like in central southern Luhansk. And the goal probably would be to roll up Russian forces along the shared, what is now Russia, and the Russian border, Novorossiya and Russia, and then look to pivot south in an attempt to envelop Russian forces in this area. But the likelihood that this would be a successful operation right now is fairly remote. I think from a political viewpoint, it would not have, while it would have a tremendous military impact on the situation and really cause the Russians to really transform its operations in Luhansk and face what's happening in northern Luhansk, we believe that the Ukrainians are looking for more of a political impact, a political statement, something that they can show really the ordinary dumbed down person in the West real success that they could understand. And I don't think any operations in Luhansk would do that. Next, a counterattack, a large-scale counterattack running from Donetsk all the way up towards Soledar, Seversk area. And the big political objective of this would obviously be the retaking of Bakhmut, would be driving Russian forces or attempting to conduct an operation that would hammer Russian forces near Avdiivka, while at the same time look to push back Russian forces near Krasnohora, and then envelop those Wagner units around Bakhmut. That could be an option. But again, it's difficult to say. There are a lot of Russian forces in this area. There are a lot of high-quality Russian forces as well fighting in this area. It is also forested, and it would be an incredibly intense, brutal battle in these areas if the Ukrainians were looking to conduct some sort of large-scale offensive operation, again with the intent of pushing Russian forces out of Bakhmut and then driving down and possibly evicting Russian forces near Soledar and Krasnohora. We would say that is probably more likely than the first operation discussed, which is in Luhansk. And then finally, well, I don't want to say finally, would be the third, would be the operation in Zaporizhzhia Oblast. And again, this would require large numbers of Ukrainian maneuver brigades, armored formations. Many of these Ukrainian units that are being reconstituted and or reformed in Western Ukraine, some of them are being armed with Western equipment, Western armored vehicles, Western tanks, what have you. And this seems to be the more likely area where the Ukrainians could be looking to conduct offensive operations. Now, the problem for the Ukrainians is going to be the open expanse of these steppes. It's a very open area that gives the Russians the ability to use its tactical aviation to hit Ukrainian targets, to hit these Ukrainian maneuver brigades as they try to rush south with the ultimate goal of severing the land corridor to Crimea. And I think that is ultimately what the Ukrainians, at least politically, would like to do. I think that would have the most political oomph to the operation, in which they could say, hey, look what we did. We severed the corridor from Russia to Crimea. We took control of Melitopol. We've threatened Berdyansk. And this operation is designed to get the Russians to capitulate. I think ultimately that's what the Ukrainians would like to do. And again, it's going to be a very, very tough operations for the Ukrainians, again, because they just don't have air power. They don't have the type of air power that is needed to prevent Russian air power from taking to the air and pounding these Ukrainian units. And then finally, the final operation that the Ukrainians could do is this D-Day-like operation that we had talked about earlier. This is, again, the most remote operation we feel at this point that the Ukrainians would undertake. Incredibly high-risk operation. Now, you could see something if we were to see a successful Ukrainian operation in Zaporizhzhia, in which the Ukrainians are able to break through Russian lines in Zaporizhzhia and start to envelop Russian units. If we were to see that, then we could possibly see a follow-on operation by Ukrainian forces crossing the Dnieper River, trying to attack the Russian forces in Kherson Oblast. But is that likely? No, it's not. Most likely right now it is going to be a Ukrainian operation, if it actually occurs, is going to be within the area near Zaporizhia, and again, possibly something in Luhansk or Donetsk. And there's also the possibility you could see a diversionary operation near Luhansk, followed by another operation into Zaporizhia, with the ultimate goal, again, is that grand prize for the Ukrainians is Melitopol, and then ultimately severing that land corridor to the Crimea. Now, is that going to happen? Probably not. I think the Ukrainians may launch this operation before they're actually ready. And again, the conflict is taking on more and more of a stagnant, protracted war that is going to be more suited to the Russians. Again, the Russians continue to build up its military-industrial complex. It is expanding its armed forces, and so are the Ukrainians, but the Russians are starting to do it at a greater rate than what the Ukrainians are doing. And like we say, with the Russians deploying up to 20,000 new troops a month, and then again, its ability to produce tanks, armored fighting vehicles, missiles, the tools of warfare, and at the same time, air power as well, the situation is going to become more and more difficult for Ukrainian forces. It looks like that the Russians are perfectly okay with having this strategy of just pounding the Ukrainian military from the air using cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, aircraft, heavy artillery, and just wearing down the Ukrainians, while at the same time preparing for some future-facing large-scale offensive operation, possibly up here in Luhansk, against Ukrainian forces. Now, is that a guarantee? No, it's not. But again, the buildup that we're seeing right now of Russian forces, where that offensive punch is taking place, is in Luhansk. Again, we've talked about a multitude of Russian divisions reportedly building up north of Seversk in this area. But again, the Russians don't appear to be in any hurry to launch large-scale maneuver operations against the Ukrainians. Again, this is a fix, hold, and decimate with artillery and air power. And that's one of the reasons why the Ukrainians want to go back to maneuver operations, to create this perception that they're taking territory and they are winning on the ground. Now, is that going to happen again? We just don't know. We can't predict the future. But the Ukrainian intent, at least what is being telegraphed, is some sort of large-scale Ukrainian offensive. Are they ready? Probably not. Is it going to be successful? Probably not. But we shall see. Thanks again for joining us today. More to come as we continue our coverage of the Russian-Ukrainian war. We'll have a segment about the prospects of war with China in an upcoming episode. Have a good day.